yang berbahagia, tibalah saatnya kita akan melanjutkan agenda kita yang berikutnya, yaitu panel diskusi yang pertama dengan tema International Professional Practice Framework Evolution, yang nantinya akan dibawakan oleh beberapa narasumber, dan semuanya adalah member of International Internal Audit Standards Board IIA Global. Di antaranya adalah Mr. Farah George Arad, CIA QIAL, dan selanjutnya adalah Mr. Hajime Yoshitake, CIA CCSA CFSA CRMA, dan selanjutnya adalah Miss Angela Inirawati Simatupang CIA CRMA. Dan tentunya Bapak Ibu sekalian, panel diskusi kali ini akan dipandu oleh moderator yang sangat luar biasa. Beliau adalah putra asli Bali yang telah menjabat Governor IIA Indonesia sejak tahun 2018, tepatnya di bulan Januari. Dan dalam kesehariannya beliau bekerja di lembaga penjamin simpanan, meraih gelar Bachelor of Applied Science dari Politeknik Keuangan Negara dan Master of Science dari University of Manchester, dan juga sejumlah sertifikasi profesi. Baik Bapak Ibu, langsung saja berikut kita sambut Bapak Imade Suwandi Putra.
Baik, terima kasih Bapak Ibu, dibacakan semuanya, saya malu sendiri jadinya. Senang sekali hari ini kita bisa berkumpul di sini. Selamat pagi Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan untuk kita semua. Sudah 3 tahun Bapak dan Ibu kita tidak berkumpul bersama-sama, hanya bertemu via online ya. Mungkin di atas kita lihat Bapak dan Ibu bajunya formal, di bawah celana pendek, baju tidur dan lain sebagainya. Sekarang kita semua well dressed gitu ya Bapak dan Ibu. Terima kasih banyak, tepuk tangan dulu untuk IIA. Dan juga Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Tema untuk panel discussion pada hari ini yang pertama adalah terkait dengan IPPF. Berbicara mengenai IPPF ini is like a love and hate relationship maybe. We love how IPPF guide ourselves ya, how we do our profession, and also we love how IPPF evaluate our performance when we are doing audits. But we hate it when our stakeholders don't recognize the value, they don't have any acknowledgement of the IPPF well. So I think this is a good time to reconsider the IPPF. Is it a good time? This is a good time to change the IPPF. But luckily, Internal Audit Standard Board saat ini, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, mohon maaf saya bilingual Bapak dan Ibu ya, karena teman-teman kita yang hadir dari Australia dan juga Jepang, Bapak dan Ibu, dan juga tentunya ada Presiden kita, Ibu Angela juga akan hadir nanti, saya akan bacakan profilnya dengan panjang juga biar semua tahu. Luckily, Internal Audit Standard Board sekarang sedang mengconsider untuk melakukan perubahan. Tidak hanya perubahan, tapi mengevolusi IPPF Bapak dan Ibu sekalian. Jadi kita akan lihat nanti selama beberapa waktu ke depan, kurang lebih 50 menit sampai 1 jam, panelis-panelis kita yang hadir. Luckily we have 3 panelists from the Internal Audit Standard Board here coming today. The first panelist, we have Mr. Farah George Arad, CIA, QIAL, and CRMA. You're just complaining because your CRMA just not pronounced well. Okay. He's Director Audit Practice in Westpac Banking Corporation. George has over 22 years of experience leading governance, risk management, and internal audit engagement across 24 countries, really worldwide. And also including 7 years of experience as a Chief Audit Executive at 2 multi-billion-dollar corporations. George has been a passionate and active volunteer with the IA since 2007, before the IPPF was established actually. In the field of research and publication. Our second speakers, Hajime Yoshitake, CIA, CCSA, CFSA, CRMA, also the member of the Internal Audit Standard Boards, the IA Global. He is the Audit and Supervisory Board member of the Taiyo Yuden Co. Limited, and also IAA Japan Board member, IAA International Internal Audit Standard Board also. Hajime has more than 20-year experience related to auditing. He was CIA at the Resona Holdings, number 4 biggest banking group in Japan. Audit Supervisory Board member at Saitama Resona Bank. He has about 15 years experience of IAS activities, such as a board of directors of the board member, advanced technology committee member, and so on and so forth. He also lectures in internal auditing and IT auditing at the Graduate School of Professional Accountancy of Meiji. And also, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian sudah mengenal Ibu Angela Simatupang, CIA CRMA. Beliau juga dalam kapasitasnya sebagai member of International Internal Audit Standard Board di IAA Global. Saat ini Bu Angela adalah Director at the Global Board of RSM International Limited and a senior partner at RSM in Indonesia. She is also member of the International Internal Audit Standard Board at the Global Institute of Internal Auditors. Joined RSM in 2000 and worked in the Australia, Bapak Ibu ya, tahun 2005. Kemudian come back to Indonesia to develop risk consulting practice, you return to Indonesia. On Master of Commerce, Internal Business of Technology from the University of Sydney and Bachelor of Economy and Accounting from Trisakti University. Holds number of professional certification, including CIA, CRMA, CFE, SCRIS, GRCP, GRCA, and COSO Enterprise Risk Management Certificate, and so on and so forth. A lot of certification. Okay, I invite all of the 3 panelists to join me in the stage, and then we look forward for the discussion regarding the FATF evolution. Please welcome. Terima kasih. Thank you for joining me on the stage, so I'm not alone here. Okay, hope you enjoyed your stay, Hajime-san and Mr. George, so far in Bali. Bu Angela also, hope you enjoyed your stay in Bali. Okay, before we go through the discussion, we know that so many of us here have a lot of questions regarding what is changing on the FATF, what FATF going to look like, and how should we prepare for the change. Before that, representing the 3 of the panelists, Ibu Angela saat ini sudah mempersiapkan presentasi mewakili seluruh panelis, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian, mungkin brief terkait dengan apa yang terjadi dengan FATF, how it's changed over the years and how it's gonna be evolved in the near future. Dan untuk itu saya persilahkan kepada Bu Angela untuk menyampaikan materi sebelum kita akan go to the discussion dengan para panelis lainnya. Saya persilahkan Ibu.
Terima kasih, Bli, Made.
Do you need this? Yeah.
Oh, this is the
Next.
okay. Friends, I will present in Bahasa Indonesia if you don't mind, and then we can discuss in English so that my fellow Indonesians can better understand. Mungkin Ibu Bapak, pagi ini kita akan coba, ini presentasinya untuk semua, satu untuk ramai-ramai, jadi compact dan ringkas. Agendanya mungkin kita akan lihat yaitu seperti apa sih perubahan dari IPPF dari tahun 2009 hingga sekarang gitu ya. Serta apa yang membuat diperlukannya, maaf ini bagaimana ya caranya? Diperlukannya perubahan pada IPPF dan standar. Hijau yang atas bawah.
Next, hijau. It's not working, maybe just say next.
Oke, saya maaf, saya bilang next aja ya. Next aja Pak. Ini kayak Sri Mulat jadinya. Untuk yang milenial mungkin nggak tahu Sri Mulat ya. Dulu mainnya di Taman Ria Sri Mulat itu, adik-adik. Waktu masih ada bebek-bebek di Taman Ria. Sekarang udah nggak ada bebek-bebek itu. Kemudian seperti apa sih yang sedang dipikirkan oleh kebetulan kami di sini berkesempatan menjadi anggota Standard Board. Jadi mungkin ada sedikit pemahaman lebih yang kami pikirkan bagaimana struktur dari IPPF yang sedang dikembangkan. Serta nanti tentunya kami berharap ada feedback dari Ibu Bapak dan juga pertanyaan-pertanyaan yang mungkin bisa membantu menjelaskan mengenai perkembangan yang ada. Boleh next? Next lagi? Oke. Sejak tahun 2009 kalau kita lihat, ada perubahan-perubahan yang sifatnya signifikan, ada yang sifatnya rutin gitu ya. Di tahun 2009 sendiri itu IPPF diterbitkan. Dan sepanjang 2010 hingga 2015 itu banyak revisi pada standar. Di tahun 2015 IPPF Relook itu terselesaikan gitu ya, ditambahkan mengenai misi dari audit internal. Core principle, implementation guidance yang mereplace practice advisory yang dulu pernah diterbitkan. Di tahun 2017 itu adalah update terakhir dari IPPF ya, dan hingga sekarang belum ada perubahan lagi. Jadi memang namanya kita dunia yang berubah gitu kan, dan kita perlu ada banyak menyikapi itu semua. Dan kalau kita lihat beberapa perubahan dari atribut standar gitu ya dan performance standar, boleh next. Dari atribut standar kita lihat yang substansial. Mungkin dari 1100 independence dan objectivity, yaitu semakin memperjelas apa yang dimaksud dengan functional reporting serta mewajibkan adanya safeguard untuk internal audit dalam melakukan aktivitas-aktivitas di luar aktivitas internal audit tradisional. Kemudian yang substansial lagi, mengenai quality assurance dan improvement program, itu diperkenalkan mengenai adanya self-assessment dengan independent external validation, serta memperjelas requirement pelaporan terkait dengan quality assurance dan improvement program. Ini juga sedang didiskusikan apakah karena saat ini 5 tahun, apa kalau kita lihat 5 tahun itu terlalu jauh, mungkin jangan-jangan sebenarnya 3 tahun gitu ya. Jadi kalau teman-teman di perbankan saat ini sudah 3 tahun, jangan-jangan sudah lebih advance itu gitu ya. Karena memang 5 tahun itu terlalu lama gitu. Untuk bisa rekomendasinya sekarang udah lupa gitu loh. 3 tahun aja udah lupa ya teman-teman ya gitu. Apalagi 5 tahun gitu. Nah itu yang terkait dengan mungkin yang saya bacakan yang substansial aja terkait atribut standar. Sementara terkait performance standar, next. Next, boleh, makasih. Nah, terkait performance standar, ini ada beberapa yang rutin gitu ya. Tetapi kalau kita lihat yang substansial, ini mengenai managing internal audit activity. Menyarankan adanya baik koordinasi dan reliance kepada other assurance provider whenever possible. Serta memperjelas lagi, mendefinisikan tanggung jawab dari external service provider. Karena memang banyak juga external service provider yang melakukan pekerjaan internal audit untuk membantu organisasi. Serta dari sisi nature of work standar 2100 yang juga substansial adalah diberikannya rekomendasi untuk melakukan pengawasan risiko dan juga pengambilan keputusan dan mewajibkan adanya penilaian risiko dan pengendalian internal terkait tujuan strategis. Itu sudah masuk dalam perubahan substansial di 2100 gitu. Sementara yang lainnya bersifat rutin gitu ya. Jadi walaupun ada tetapi yang kita lihat sekarang mungkin banyak pendapat IPPF itu nggak gesit gitu. Nggak bisa menangkap aspirasi. Boleh next? Jadi kalau kita coba rangkum pendapat-pendapat dari publik, dari stakeholders gitu. Feedback yang diterima gitu ya, bahwa pertama ekspektasinya adalah harus mensimplifikasi struktur dari IPPF. Kedua adalah memberikan clarification dan juga menyelaraskan elemen-elemen agar tidak ada duplikasi dan inkonsistensi. Mungkin teman-teman di sini sudah mafhum IPPF, ada beberapa yang duplikasi dari standar yang satu ke yang lain gitu ya. Jadi itu juga merupakan concern gitu. Standar tidak timely dan tidak bisa merespon emerging topical area. Seperti sekarang kita lihat misalnya cyber security, ESG dan lain-lain gitu ya. Kalau kita melihat IPPF sekarang, dia tidak bisa bicara, ngobrol dengan emerging topik seperti itu. Lalu memastikan adanya standar yang practical tapi juga applicable gitu ya, baik untuk semua ukuran, industri, kematangan organisasi, jadi bisa diaplikasikan kepada semua. Itu merupakan salah satu concern yang disampaikan oleh stakeholder. Kemudian adalah perlu adanya komunikasi dan advokasi dengan baik internal audit tentunya, dengan stakeholders, dengan regulator. Gitu. Jadi dianggap saat ini IPPF yang terakhir dibuat tahun 2017 itu belum bisa meeting expectation. Padahal kita kalau assessment belum bisa penuh semua gitu ya, katanya nggak meeting expectation mahal. Nah sekarang kita lihat apa benar poin-poin itu. Saya ambil salah satu aja, boleh next? Mengenai clarify dan align elements, adanya duplikasi dan inkonsistensi. Ada nggak sebenarnya, ini juga membingungkan gitu kan, ada clear alignment nggak sebenarnya antara core principles dengan IAS standards? Sejujur-jujurnya agak sedikit membingungkan gitu. Ini link kemana, align kemana gitu. Kalau misalnya, apakah kalau saya confirm dengan standar, maka my unit align nggak dengan strategi objektif dan risiko organization? Itu bisa dilihat di core principle 4. Tetapi kalau align itu memang harus bisa dengan core principle 4 atau bisa dicapai tanpa strategic internal audit planning. Kemudian pertanyaan berikutnya misalnya, kalau saya confirm dengan standar, beneran saya punya function jadi insightful, proaktif dan future focus? Ada yang percaya? Gimana? Boleh tanda angkat tangan yang percaya? Gak ada yang percaya kayaknya, cuma satu di sini yang percaya. Ini juga kepepet kayaknya, karena di panggung. Biar ada aja. Oh iya, biar ada ya. Waduh, agak ini makanya. Jadi perlu ada alignment dan simplifikasi yang lebih dimengerti dan bisa bicara dengan baik dengan kita para internal auditor, baik dengan kita di sini yang menjadi bohirnya gitu kan ya. Baik juga dengan kita di sini yang menjadi regulator. Standar itu harus bisa bicara dan dipahami. Nah kalau kita lihat, boleh next. Yang sebelah kiri itu adalah current IPPF ya, modelnya seperti itu. Nah yang baru yang sedang dipikirkan, kalau kita lihat implementation guidance itu jadi naik ke atas, sementara guidance hanya menjadi guidance di bawah. Dan standar itu akan ada general standard yang dimulai dengan principle, requirement gitu ya, recommended practice yang sifatnya tadi universally applicable regardless of size, maturity and industry. Kemudian juga mencakup core element of internal auditing. Lalu ada application standard atau requirement. Namanya masih berusaha berubah ya, nama-namanya masih bisa berubah untuk ini semua, terutama untuk di application standard. Nah, ini yang nanti rencananya akan dibuat untuk bisa tadi bicara mengenai spesifik topik untuk application standard atau requirement ini. Boleh next? Sementara secara komponen, pertama purpose of internal auditing, ya. Lalu kita bicara mengenai ethics dan professionalism, kita sebutnya di sini domain gitu ya. Lalu domain 3 adalah yang baru mengenai governing the internal audit function. Yang keempat, managing the internal audit function, dan kelima, performing internal audit services. Nanti kalau ada yang tertarik bisa ditanya, kita bisa jelaskan cakupan pemahamannya dalamnya apa saja gitu ya. Tetapi secara konsep gitu, boleh next. Propose dari new purpose internal auditing adalah seperti ini. Nah, kita juga coba lakukan diskusi dengan stakeholders gitu. Kita lakukan diskusi dengan stakeholders, apakah the proposed purpose ini merupakan improvement. Alhamdulillah 83% bilang ya gitu ya. Ada 11% bilang not sure dan 8% tidak suka sama sekali gitu. Tetapi majority merasa ini adalah purpose yang mengimprove gitu untuk internal audit. Sementara untuk domain 2 sampai 5 gitu ya, boleh next. Ini komponennya seperti ini. Ethics dan professionalism ini kita ambil dari yang sudah ada sekarang gitu karena saat ini masih cukup baik. Sementara untuk domain 3, governing internal audit function, ini yang baru karena apa? Kita harus bicara ke board. Dan board harus paham responsibility-nya dan accountability-nya untuk bisa internal audit sukses membantu objektif perusahaan itu ada di board. Selama ini standar kita hanya bicara kepada internal audit. Ngomong aja berdua, padahal untuk internal audit bisa successful itu perlu support baik dari board dan dari regulator gitu yang membentuk ekosistem. Nah, ini kita coba masukkan domain baru. Domain keempat adalah mengenai managing internal audit function yang terdiri dari strategically plan, managing resources hingga enhance performance, dan domain kelima adalah performing. Jadi benar-benar kalau dulu ada inkonsistensi dalam arti bicara mengenai managing internal audit function, tapi tiba-tiba bicara mengenai specific engagement di dalam chapter yang sama gitu ya. Nah sekarang kita coba simplifikasi dan lebih clarify. Untuk managing itu adalah memanage the function itself, sementara untuk engagement spesifik akan ada dalam performing internal audit services. Tujuannya supaya lebih mengclarify. Mungkin next, sekian dari presentasi kami bertiga. Ini presentasi kami bertiga, saya cuma membantu supaya berbahasa Indonesia. I hope you can understand. No?
I think it went well.
This is actually George presentation. He made all of this, so.
No, we all work together on it. But I like the fact that none of you raised your hand on core principle 9. That was quite interesting to see.
So yeah, we are happy and ready to answer all of your questions on this evaluation on IPPF. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bu Angela. Before I get back to you, I see that Haji Misan already take some notes here. So I'm interested about the how is the evolution of the FEVF is forming in the how do you the Internal Audit Standard Board get any opinion or get any consultation or also how to include any stakeholders? We also want to know how do we can contribute to the change of the standard.
Reaction for this IPPF revolution. I want to say two things. Number one, last month in Washington DC, Global Assembly in IIA is held. And at that time, IIA made a questionnaire, made a survey about this reform of new IPPF. And I just got the result yesterday, and let me share with you. Let me say. Okay, there's 6 questions, and they ask 6 questions, and the answer is 4 alternatives. One is love it, second is like it, third is not sure, fourth is I don't like it. And 6th question is, number 1, do you think proposed purpose of internal auditing is a kind of it's replacement of mission and definition, is improvement? They said more than 80%, 83% says love it or like it. So very positive. And second one, do you think new standard domains clarify and simplify the organization of the standard? More than 90% says love it or like it. And do you think incorporating recommend practices and demonstrate conformance will help internal auditors implementing standard? More than 73% says love it or like it. And this one, the term of mandate approximately conveys the meaning of authority, role, and responsibility in your language or country. That is the lowest support. Love it, like it, it says 61%. So when I translate into Japanese, we must be careful. We need a good translate. Then, will organization stand in these two domains, help chief audit executives, IT management, and also internal auditors understand their responsibility? 87% says love it or like it. And they support auditing application stand. This is, addressing with, what should I say, new or emerging areas, timely areas, says love it, like it, more just 80% says love it or like it. So reaction is very positive. That's one thing. Second thing is I made a speech, a presentation in Japan about this IPPF. Maybe my presenter is second best next to Angela today, she made, but I don't know. I don't understand your language, but anyway, since the material is good, so I think that's the presentation. And so far, I got a quite positive reaction from Japanese professionals and also scholars. That is responsibility.
Okay, thank you Haji Min-san. So Bapak dan Ibu disampaikan. Okay, you want to add something?
Thanks,
Okay.
Marty. To arrive at that good reaction that they received through the Global Assembly and the various institutes, the IIA had to go through extensive consultations. The arrival at that change didn't happen overnight. So various key stakeholders were consulted. And one of the key stakeholder groups, of course, you're familiar with most of them, but one of the key stakeholder groups was the IIA EQA assessors or QAR assessors, the people who come in and audit internal audit functions. So there's like around 50 or more people around the world who specialize in doing these audits. And we interviewed a sample of these individuals to get their insights on what are you seeing? Because when they audit an internal audit function, they're speaking to both the stakeholders and the auditors. They have a great view of how things are happening in practice. So their input has been valuable, and that's helped reach that outcome which Hajime-san was explaining.
I
Yeah.
think to add
You want to add?
what George has said, the IASB also have consultation with European Commission, with IMF, World Bank, etc., etc. So this has been going since 2021, right?
Correct.
Yes, and the process is still ongoing, and we still have a roundtable with a lot of stakeholders to ensure that the standards do speak well to support the establishment of an effective internal audit function.
So basically, consultation is like in the early stage of the development of the standard, and
It's
also
throughout.
Yeah, pardon?
It's throughout. It's not only in the initial stage
Okay,
of the
it's-
development, but
It's perpetual and continuing.
yes.
Okay.
Process is important.
Yeah. So I remember what you said in your presentation about this value acknowledged by the shareholders. So to achieve that, we have to consult with them. We have to give them let them engage in our how we develop this VVF. Okay. So before we know what is the requirement for the auditor that we should set in the standard. We ask the we ask the stakeholders. But I want to. I think maybe the second question will be go to Bu Angela or George. Maybe George first and followed by Bu Angela. What are the requirements is set out in the standards? Could you please elaborate more?
You're referring to the new ones. What are
Yeah,
the new requirements?
I'm referring to the new ones.
Will it be mission impossible to get that presentation back up again so
Yeah.
everyone can see?
Bisa
dipasang
tolong
lagi
ditampilkan
presentasinya?
presentasi yang tadi Bapak Ibu?
This way I'll explain it, at least you can understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, we can stop right there. So, as Angela explained, there are 5 new domains, so that's the main change that happened. Domain 1 being the purpose, but Domain 2, we're not going to get into that sort of details.
Different slide will be better. 5 domains.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the domain's on the earlier slide, the first
Yes,
one.
that's
Yeah.
right.
So when we look at these changes and what's being proposed, we need to keep in mind that this is what current thinking is. It's not necessarily the, end state of our standards. As Angela rightfully pointed out, there's extensive consultations happening. It's going to be exposed later on. So this is a work in progress. I'm going to talk to the managing internal audit domain 4. That's one of the domains which has a lot of change, and I led the change in that space. And Angela will talk to us about the governing domain which she led. So when it comes to the managing the internal audit function, this is how a chief audit executive needs to run his internal audit department. If you look at the current version of the standards, you basically have standard 2000. It's really high level, there's not much there. It's all about your skills. It's all about good practices that you've leveraged to arrive at that, at how you manage the internal audit function. So to come up with what should the managing domain look like, we did a lot of research. So we looked at what other institutes had put together, like we started at home with the IAA guidance, right? There's IAA guidance from Australia, there's for financial services, there's guidance on financial services for the IAA UK. So these are good practices which we've leveraged. We've looked at Gartner's maturity model. We've looked at Deloitte's 5 Ps, or maybe they have a new thing at the moment. We've looked at things from KPMG and Ernst & Young. So there's a lot of leading practices that were sifted through to arrive at what should this function look like. So if we start off with strategically plans, naturally as an internal audit function, you will have to develop your internal audit plan. But to the point earlier around how do you align to the strategy of the organization? What will your internal audit function look like 3 years from now? You need to have a proper internal audit strategy. We're not talking about a series of audits you're going to conduct over 3 years. We're talking about how your people, process, technology will evolve and meet the requirements of that business over a longer term period. So strategic planning and introducing the concept of a strategic plan is one of the key changes that's happening with the standard. The other sort of change is around improving the coordination and reliance with other assurance providers. So the concept of reliance was introduced in 2017 with the current version of the standards. They talked about that 2050 standard that was introduced then. This version hopefully will have to evolve that, because more and more companies are talking about combined assurance, aligned assurance, and how the 3 lines of defense work together to provide assurance to to the board. We look at our bank, we have 7 functions doing audit work in the second line. That's line 2B, let's say, not line 2A. There's people who are doing audits within that second line. 7 different functions which we need to coordinate with as an internal audit function. Some of the more global companies like Rio Tinto, BHP, they have teams of 5 to 8 people managing the coordination of assurance plans of 20 or so assurance providers across their organization. So we need to take this into account and how we evolve from that coordination and reliance piece to presenting the boards with that big picture, which is essential to the success of the 3 lines model and any internal audit function. One thing, again, when it comes to managing resources, it's not about just having bodies to do the work. We're talking about building a talent management program. How is talent going to be managed in your organization? How are you going to retain people? Now in this world where there's hybrid working, people they want work-life balance. How do you retain people? How do you motivate them? How do you get them to work? These are some of the measures that we're addressing. One of the other aspects which we proposed, which I think will be moving to Angela's domain, is around the qualifications of the chief audit executive. How many chief audit executives are there in the world who, 1, don't come from an internal audit background, and 2, don't have any professional qualifications? How are these people going to run a professional internal audit shop? That's something which needs to be addressed and needs to be worked with. That includes the seniority of that person within the organization. We're not talking about their age, we're talking about where they fit. So I'm an audit committee at a local government in Australia, audit committee member. And they have the CEO, they have executive managers, they have managers, and they have coordinators, and they have everyone else. So their quote-unquote chief audit executive is at that fourth level there. So they call them chief audit executive, and I'm saying that doesn't work. We're talking about how you revive that and change that, because you can't just position internal audit so low that he can't manage the internal audit function. Other aspects that are coming into play are technology. While we can't specify the use of technology in every single audit, we have to specify that the internal audit function has access to technology, be that collaboration tools, an audit management system, data analytics capability, and others. You need to have access to technology depending on the nature of your work to do the audits that you have. So that will be mandated and clarified. The other point around communicating effectively, we talk about communication in the current standards in the context of, oh, we've sent the report to our stakeholders, we've sent the report to the board. But communication is a two-way street. When I'm talking to you people, when I'm having a conversation, you're collecting information, you're delivering that information. So we're going to talk about mechanisms for collecting feedback, be that surveys or others. So you need to understand what that feedback is. You're going to have a mechanism to agree what are the expectations of the board from you. How do you agree these expectations? So, and at the end of the year, how have you demonstrated that these expectations have been met? That's critical to any internal audit function. If you're not clear on what the board wants from you and you're not showing them that you're delivering on that, what is your reason for existence? Lastly, when we talk about the Quality Assurance and Improvement Program, a few improvements that have been suggested there relate to mandating horizontal reviews, right? So you have a quality assurance and improvement program, but you also want to look at thematics which take place, like some themes from reports and thematics, horizontal reviews, things of that sort. You want to look at retrospectives or what they call lessons learned, and these lessons learned aren't necessarily at an engagement level. When something goes wrong in your company, something goes wrong in another company, you want to see, would the internal audit function have picked up something like this had it been audited? So you want to make sure that you're always looking, keeping the department up to speed. And finally, we talk about the external quality assessment. You want to make sure that whoever's coming to do that external quality assessment has the right credentials and qualifications. A few months ago, we got audited by a Big Four company who shall not be named, and none of the team members had a CIA. I'm like, how are they coming to audit us against the standards when none of them are certified internal auditors? Unfortunately, they were appointed by our board, which is a question that should come up later, but we won't get into that. So we have to mandate qualifications of those people who come in. Are they capable of doing that work? And finally, and I think this will not pass, is we were recommending that for larger internal audit functions, they do their EQAs every 3 or 4 years rather than 5 years. Because when you look at an organization and the governance structure, internal audit is an integral piece to any organization. It's key to your governance, it's key to that assurance. And if you're going to tell me that an integral part of our organization was only being audited once every 5 years, I'd be shocked. Like if I as an auditor, if I went to the audit committee and told them that, I'd be in big trouble, right? They want you to look at a lot of your highs all the time, make sure you're addressing your risks. So internal audit is that critical area there. Over to you, Angela. I think I talked a bit too much there.
No. George ini, jadi kita ada bagi-bagi dalam working group ya. George memang dia handle untuk jadi leader di working group untuk bikin domain managing internal audit function. Jadi dia very conversant mengenai itu. Sementara memang saya melead working group untuk governing. Ini adalah dua domain yang mungkin significant changes dibanding IPPF yang saat ini ada gitu. Nah, tadi sudah panjang lebar diceritakan oleh George mengenai managing internal audit function. I'm just going to add a bit on the governing internal audit function. So if you see that although the component is authorized by the board, some say positioned independently, it's already in the current IPPF and overseen by the board. Actually, the draft principle that we are currently developing is that the first one is that it's authorized by the board. So the board establishes the authority, the role and responsibility of internal audit function. So it gives you mandate. It gives you mandate on what you should do based on their needs, the stakeholders' needs, and because you are given that mandate, they are responsible to give you the access to facilitate you to be able to meet the objective and the mandate that they given the internal auditors. 7, position independently. Well, it's been in the current IPPF, but when we drill down, actually it's talking about the responsibility of the board or those in charge with governance to establish and protect the internal audit independent. So the third one on the principle 8, overseen by the board, is that the board oversees the internal audit function to ensure the function effectiveness. It is a total change from the current IPPF that is only talking about the responsibility of the chief audit executive. If we see the current IPPF, it's only talking about the CAE must do this, the CAE should do this, the CAE is responsible. How far can a CAE goes without support of the board? So this domain is driven from that spirit that to be able to function effectively, to meet the mandate given to us as internal auditors, the board must support. And this standards is made in the spirit of public interest. So that's why we have many consultations, so that we have the buyout from the stakeholders, buyout from management, buyout from the board, those in charge with governance, so that we can elevate the function and the practice of internal auditors. And basically the domain 3 and 4 is the most significant changes, if you can see from the IPPF.
Yeah, thank you. But by your explanation, we see that a lot of things is changing from the current FPPF. And also, Mr. Hajime-san want to add something.
Okay, I want to talk about application standards.
Yes.
As slide showed, one of the reasons why standards do not meet with stakeholders' expectations, board members' expectations, management expectations, which is the reason, one of the reasons is, standards do not include timely and emerging topical areas. So, for example, digital transformation, sustainability, ESG, many emerging issues we are facing with. How internal auditors cope with these kind of things? So, would you open the side of the new standard, composed with general standard and application standard, please?
Please.
Anyhow, okay, that's okay. So new standards comply with 2 standards. One is general standard, and the other is application standards. And the reason why standards happen is included is to address these kind of emerging issues. And in application standard, new concept is introduced, which is must be considered. Standard always says we must do this, must do what. That is the standard. And to achieve must do, there is a guidance. It says several should do how is the guidance. And to achieve what? There are several ways, but guidance recommended one of the best method. But so far, the combination is a standard must do what, and guidance include should do how. But emerging issues, who knows the best things to do? The management or the board of directors, what they should do? What is the best situation? We don't know. Sometimes we are not sure what is to be. In that case, if we don't know clear what is the best solutions, how internal auditor make a decision making or judge what kind of standard or criteria we should depend on. So new concept is introduced. That is must consider what, must do what, not must do it, but must consider what to cope new issues. Sometimes we don't know what should do, so we must consider at least. And in the process of consideration, maybe we should talk with board members or management or auditors. Through discussion, maybe we can find more new ideas. That is important. So it says impact for internal audit in a changing world. This is one of the key issues. And maybe through the consideration, through consultation, maybe we can add the value to the organization. And that is one of the important
Thank you.
points.
Maybe I have a lot of questions for each of you. I think maybe I can start with George. When you explained a lot of things about the changes in the managing internal audit standards. And we know that the purpose of the evolution is to make it simpler and how to make the standard pace with the change of the world. How do you elaborate that? I mean, like a lot of things is changed. People don't like change, you know. How do we keep up with the pace of the world changing in rapid way, and also how to keep it simple? I mean, like it's so contradictory. You can elaborate.
Thank you, Madhu. I think in terms of simple, I think that's quite a challenge at the moment. But I'll get to that in a second. When we're looking at a changing world, your standards have been static, as Ms. Angela explained in her presentation, since 2009. Nothing's changed. But the world around you has not been static since 2009. So there is a need to change, right? There's a need to evolve those standards. There's a need to be closer to better practice. When we go to organizations and speak with them, and we talk to them about the standards, a lot of them say something which really hurts me, and it's, oh, the standards are basic. Yeah, we already do that. So I don't want to go to an organization and hear that the standards are basic and we have leading practices from company X or company Y. I want to have what is the minimum acceptable level of practice that an internal audit function should have at this point in time. What is good for us at this point in time? Right now, with the way the standards are structured, the concept of aligning the principles with the concept of aligning our individual standards to principles and domains, that's a good structure to have in terms of a structure. But then we start to introduce other elements there, because keep in mind, when you're sitting at the standards board, we're 3 here, there's 12 other people on that board, and with 15 people, you have 30 opinions. So we have to be very clear on how that moves and how things will change. The simplification is essential, and the simplification has to come in terms of not just having the right standards in place, having conformance at the right level. So saying, are we going to conform with every single standard or every single recommended practice? Or are we going to think about the big picture of this function and give sort of people flexibility to apply within those guidelines? And these are important questions which still need to be answered. Because the more complex the standards are, the harder it is to apply them, the harder it is to implement them, and that makes the profession look bad. When we look at if I look at the countries where I've worked, Australia, UAE, Canada, there's a lot of functions which don't even apply the standards. In Australia, let's say, you have people who don't know the standards. I work for the largest internal audit function in Australia. In that function, I'd say 20 people to 30 people understand the standards. That's the percentage of sort of CIAs you have. The rest are just specialists from non-audit backgrounds. So how do you get these people on board? How do you train these people? How do you let them know, what does this mean for me? So there's a lot of resources and an effort that has to go into that. And it starts off with us as, how do we say, members, having the will to apply the standards, understanding them, building them in as internal audit leaders and applying them within our organization. But at the same time, there has to be a top-down push. So we as a standards board are developing a product, right? We have to develop a product which can be sold, right? We don't want a car that moves 20 kilometers an hour. You want a good car that's fuel efficient, etc. So think of those standards as that car you're going to buy. So if it doesn't look good, if it doesn't move fast, doesn't have nice features and air conditioning, you're not going to want that car. So we're going to produce a good product. So once you have that good product, that product needs to be marketed and sold. And that's something which has to happen not just by IIA, global. That's something which has to happen at an individual country level. The IIA Australia starts to push for the standards once they're convinced with the product, of course, at each state level. You have the Malaysians, they've legislated the standards for listed companies, if I'm not mistaken. So that's the effort that here we have to do in Indonesia to do that, because someone from IIA Global doesn't speak your language, doesn't know your culture, doesn't know anything. This is up to you to market that. So the challenge has to be addressed from us as individuals and at that sort of institute level as well.
Anyone want to add?
Okay. As George said, Standard Board IISB made a standard as simple as possible, because every situation, every country, every organization, or every company has a different situation. And so the standards are written in a principle basis to make it simple. But since the standards simplify, people, internal auditor, can interpret in many ways. So two things is very important. One is internal auditor must be very ethical. He must be, he or she must be very based on ethical manner. That is important. We cannot interpret standards in a selfish way. We should be objective way we should interpret. That's number one. And number two is we need a deep understanding of principle. What's the spirit of standard? What standard really saying from the bottom of the heart? That really you understand. And after this understanding and strong ethics, you can apply standard very effectively and efficiently and correctly. That's the reason the ethics and professionalism comes before domain 3 to 5. So ethics based. And then please understand as much as possible the meanings of contents of standards. That's my advice.
Thank you, Hayumi-san. Want to add something?
Just a little bit. I think George has said that there's a lot of people in the board, like 15 people with maybe more than 30 opinions. So when you said simple, some of us do push for the principle base, but once upon a time it's also carried on to a more rule-based and more descriptive. It's the temptation to go there is always there. The temptation to go more detailed, more prescriptive, more rule-based. So this is still a work in process, and there might be changes in the standards, but we are trying to make it applicable to all. So simple, but not that simple, can be applied in any size industries because it's more interpretation of how it is, as long as you achieve the objectives. And I think that what George said, the takeaway is very important, that this is not the IIA standard per se, this is our standard. And this standards really wants to ensure that internal auditors are positioned well, can add value, can give value, can contribute. So do not separate yourself from that standard. Own that standards. Promote that standards, because if you have the buy-in, of course, everyone will have its role in promoting it. But if you get that buy-in of the standards, your function will work better. You have the support of your team, you have the support of your peers, you have the support of your oddities and all of your stakeholders. And that way it can support us in really contributing to our organization. So this is something that, a mindset that this is not just a standard that becomes a burden to us to implement it, but it is a standard that belongs to you, that you need to embrace because the standard supports you. So I think that's it.
Yeah. I think you implied on my opening saying that the standard is like love and hate relationship, right?
Don't say love and hate
Is it?
relationship. You don't hate yourself. Well, sometimes, but you have to embrace it because when you say something that is separate from you, you will start to say that, well, I don't want to apply this, or this is too difficult to implement, or this does not apply to me. But when it's a part of you, you will
Accept it.
try. Not only accept, you will try to implement it. Not now, but you will take steps, either huge or baby steps, to be able to implement that.
Okay, thank you. Nice. Maybe before I give the opportunity for the audience to ask you a question, maybe last question for every one of you, about the governance change. There is one word that is interesting for me, a word mandate. What's the difference between mandates and the mandate is like when the board's saying that you can do this and that, you have to do this and that. And then what's the difference between mandate and the charter in our previous standards that the boards have to sign? And how do you picture in the future when these standards already implement, our stakeholders, the boards, we're gonna say about this, like, saying that to support internal audit function, to support your internal auditors, you are required to do something. You are required to give the mandate. How do you picture it in the future? Bu Angela first, maybe.
I'll go first, and then you can add more. Mandat, Pak.
Yes.
Yeah. You are given the task to do this because I want you to do it. I give you the mandate to sell my company. And you'll find the company that wants to buy my company, right? That is a mandate. What are you instructed to do? That relates to what is the need of the stakeholders. And because I gave you the mandate, then I will support you so that you can achieve the mandate, right? The mandate itself needs to be recorded in the charter. So the charter is just a governance document to record and formalize, including the mandate and other things. So, but if you say the internal audit responsibility is A, B, C, D, E, without clear description that, hey, the A, B, C, D, E, it is something that you want me to do. You told me to do this. Why now you say, don't say it, right? So when you say mandate, you told me to do this, so I'm doing this for you.
But having this required in our standards is another issue. How do you picture that our stakeholder will gonna say about that?
Well, you can. Yeah.
So definitely there's a role for the head of audit to help shape the scope and what the value this internal audit function is going to deliver. So if you look at our internal audit function, yes, you have some internal audit, you have your internal audit responsibilities, but you have some SOX work that's been assigned to you. So that's part of that mandate or that scope that's been given to you. Not that you want it, but that's something where that's been put in. It's articulating in that charter what I expect you to be looking at from a risk perspective, what I expect you to provide opinions on how frequently I want you to report to me, and what sort of safeguards I've put in place to make sure that your work is done up to quality, to make sure that your work is reported independently, objectively to us as a board. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all internal audit that exists within, within the world. Each function has sort of different intricacies. If I look at, let's say, Suncor Energy, which is the largest oil and gas company in Canada, they had operational risk. They had two sort of units in the third line of defense. They had internal audit, which addressed everything except technical safety issues, and that technical safety was third line. And so their mandate was shaped in a way which highlighted this is what they're going to do. In previous roles, I had responsibilities for fraud risk. That's a mandate which we don't have now in our current function. So it all depends on the board, what they want, and you have to help them ask what you want. So you, as a CA, you need to tell them, this is the world of things. Where are we defining our boundaries? And in, for example, non-financial services, you may want to be facilitating risk management. So you have to keep all of that in mind when you help them with that mandate. And you have to educate them, because our stakeholders really don't understand our standards. When you look at that detail, you look at the domain, it's a bit simpler now. They've understood the core principles when I've presented them to board and senior level executives. But when you start to talk to them about, let's say, standard 2600 around the acceptance of unacceptable risk, go ahead, explain that to people. That's really hard, right? So you have to simplify and articulate what it is that you want and help them to build that mandate with you. So even though it's their responsibility in the governance domain, you're not talking to internal audit experts. It's your role to help facilitate that process.
Yeah, I think that's good enough. But mandate, only to ask us to do it, but also give us a responsibility, but also authority and role and authority. That is another important thing. Because this time we added governance domains. Why? Because whatever internal CAE says, we need this, we do this, we want to do this, we need a budget and everything. But in the end of the day, if the governance says, the board of directors says, no, you don't have to do, then we cannot do that. But for us to achieve our goals and help organizations achieve their purpose, we need a certain authority and also staff and budget and other things. The governance is so until current standard, it is a kind of one way operator. But now governance, we ask governance to give us the kind of right authority and also many things. That that part is also included in the mandate.
Thank you, Hajime-san. So I'm inviting our guests or all of attendants an opportunity to ask questions to our panelists here. It's lucky, okay. One question, please give a mic for. Okay, maybe. Okay, the second question. Maybe just 2 questions and followed by the answer.
Halo, thank you. Saya dari Robi Sani dari Komite Audit Adaro. Tadi sudah dijelaskan mengenai evaluation changes dari standar FFF. Sedangkan di dunia itu ada disruption. Disruption mean rapid or fast changes. Misalnya mengenai cyber security. Minggu lalu ada IKI, Ikatan Komite Audit Indonesia, mengadakan seminar dengan topik cyber security, di mana pembicaranya adalah praktisi internal audit, di mana disarankan agar perusahaan sudah mulai melakukan cyber security audit. Pertanyaannya sekarang, apakah sudah ada atau akan ada cyber security standar? Karena tadi di dalam slide saya belum lihat. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question is asking about, do we have any specific standard on cybersecurity or any topics else in the upcoming standards? Because like what this gentleman said, people usually refer to other standards when internal audit do their internal audit jobs, specifically on cybersecurity or maybe ESG, something like that. Do we have it in FPVF for the next?
So this is one of the areas where, it's a great question that you put forward. This is one of the areas where we're having a lively debate on the standards board on the application standards, right? So when we talk about what is a standard, that's something that's mandated. That's something you must do. When we look at these application standards, the current thinking is we're going to include something around cybersecurity. We're going to include something around ESG. We're going to include something around X and Y. That sort of thinking, in my opinion, again, I said there's a debate going on. My opinion is that's not our job. That's not our role as an Institute of Internal Auditors. We can produce certain guidance that people, depending on the size and maturity of their organization, may refer to those standards. But when you look at cybersecurity, I will think that NIST, ISO, and all these others have much better standards than us and will always have better standards than us. They're in the business of cybersecurity. We're in the business of internal audit. And our standards need to focus on the practice of internal audit, how you do internal audits. It's sort of like IFRS versus the ISAs. The ISAs is how you execute the external audit. The IFRS is how you treat, this is, sorry about that, I keep bumping into this. And the IFRS is how you treat all these different areas. The world of internal audit is at least 10 plus times bigger than the external auditor's world. You're talking about cybersecurity. How many other risks can people name in this room? There's so many. And if we're going to develop a standard for every single one of these risks, I think personally we lose our identity. And we need to focus on how you do internal audits, and that's the work, and that's the way we do it, as opposed to how should cybersecurity be managed, what constitutes good practice in the world of cybersecurity, ESG or other. But again, there are different views. Like I said, it's a debate we're having.
Yes, I think that's a very good question and very timely questions. And my opinion, IISB trying to deal with this kind of matter in an application standard. But that one, application standard, we talk about how we audit. But thinking of, as George said, regarding the management of cybersecurity or anti-cybersecurity and other things, maybe we should, as George said, maybe we should think of using other standards, such as ISO 2701 or like that. There are so many professional standards. Why don't we use as a kind of management standard? That becomes a kind of criteria when we judge internal auditor. So these kind of things, the things we must consider, will be defined in an application standard. That's my understanding. Maybe different opinions.
Yeah, like here, I mean, we have
Yeah.
different views.
We have different
I concur with George that it does not have to be a specific standard for ESG and cybersecurity, but part of the member of the board thinks that it's needed. But like we thought that the IIA standards provide guidance on how you run your audit shop, how an organization run its audit shop, establishes and runs and manages it, not providing a detailed methodology on per se cybersecurity audit. We can drill down for any audit topic a methodology and a standard that is different from the IA standards, because what we would like to nurture is that you as an auditor, when you're doing this audit, this is how you do your audit, but not providing the methodology itself for each specific topic. But for guidance, we have developed and issued a guidance for cybersecurity actually, and it's downloadable for all members free of charge at IA website.
Okay, if I might conclude, These topics is on an ongoing discussion. It's have not been decided yet. Okay. So demikian Bapak. Sementara mungkin IAA berfokus kepada pengimplementasian standar bagaimana melakukan pekerjaan internal audit. Untuk hal-hal yang sifatnya spesifik, IAA sudah memiliki guidance yang bisa dijadikan acuan. Baik, pertanyaan yang kedua, tadi saya lihat ada satu Bapak di tengah, mohon bantuannya untuk mikrofon. Mungkin yang terakhir mengingat waktu Bapak Ibu ya.
Terima kasih. Perkenalkan, saya Hernowo dari Kementerian Sosial, Bapak. Ada 2 pertanyaan mungkin untuk panelis, biar saya sampaikan mungkin. Number one, what is the most strategic step that the IAA will take to make standard change to anticipate a global recession that may occur or is inside, so that the world can be saved from a recession? Number two, earlier it was stated that one of the standard is auditor independence. The question is, what is the most effective step to implement auditor independence if the management leadership comes from element of political? Which of courts have interest in it? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll take question number 2.
Okay, please George.
Yeah, so just to clarify, question number 2 was around what is the most effective way to maintain internal auditor independence?
When your management is from the political party. So there's an added sentence in the back.
Okay, from a political party. So, yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear that one. I shouldn't have jumped to volunteer for that. But I think it's all around the legislature. So if we look at local government within the Australian context, it's very political. Everyone gets nominated. You have councils which serve as the effective board for an internal audit function. It's the mandate of that board, and it's the responsibility of that board to safeguard the independence. So recently, I think it was last year, the government of Western Australia, where I live, they issued guidelines for audit committees and boards around internal audit. And the first principle was the audit committee must safeguard the independence of the internal audit function. So that's one thing that they introduced, making sure that they know that their job is to safeguard the independence. And I'll get to that in a second. They also talked about how you need to evaluate the effectiveness of that audit committee and that board in doing its function. Every 2 years, you review the board, you review the committee. Because if you have a dysfunctional corporate governance environment, you won't be able to function, you won't be able to thrive as an internal auditor, you won't have independence. Forget the independence. Let's say you report to that audit committee and everyone tells you to do something different, you have way bigger problems than just independence. And I give the example of a private business where one of my colleagues used to work. The audit committee chair was the father, and the son and the brother were the other two, because it was a family business. We're talking multi-billion-dollar family business. And the brother tells the head of audit to investigate his father. So I'm like, how is that going to happen? In what world is something like this going to take place? So if the governance piece isn't clear, and if that isn't effective, you're not going to be in a good situation. But if we take that last curveball sentence out of the picture, the best way for independence naturally is your reporting line. And your reporting line means who pays your salary? Where is the money coming from for your salary? Where is the money coming from for your bonus and performance appraisal? Because if you read the golden rule, he who controls the gold makes the rules. And that applies to internal audit functions as well. Whoever's paying my bill is my boss. And if the CEO is running my bonus, my performance, controlling my future, I won't have independence. But if I have bickering at that audit committee level, I have way bigger problems that I need to solve at their level rather than at that structural level, in my opinion.
Mungkin saya tambahin dikit ya. Nggak harus dari partai politik sih Pak, kita nggak independen gitu ya. Bisa dari manapun, tadi George sampaikan dari keluarga dan lain-lain. Makanya kita coba bikin ada governance domain untuk memperjelas siapa yang punya tanggung jawab, memastikan internal audit itu bisa independen. Tapi balik lagi, kalau memang nggak ada governance-nya yang baik, ya susah Pak memang gitu ya. Kita jujur-jujur aja, idealnya ada, tapi kalau tidak ada ya itu kayak nabrak tembok terus gitu kan. Kita nabrak jalan, nabrak tembok, jalan, nabrak tembok. Memang berat gitu ya hidup, itulah tantangan. Saya prihatin gitu. Ya, tapi itu kenyataan di kita semua gitu loh. Itu realita kita gitu. Jadi mungkin kita bisa seperti air pelan-pelan mengikis batu dengan terus memberikan edukasi gitu ya, memfasilitasi pemahaman. It will take, I don't know, a century dalam kondisi seperti itu. Tapi air bisa mengikis batu sedikit-sedikit. Atau kalau kita tidak mau, kita bisa coba different venue gitu ya. Tidak di tempat itu, walaupun itu juga tidak semudah itu berpindah-pindah antar organisasi, saya tahu. Dan ini balik lagi kepada periuknasi anak-anak kita sekolah dan lain-lain gitu. Memang ini adalah tantangan yang berat gitu ya untuk kita tetap menjaga independensi, tetap berlaku etis gitu. It's a challenge saya rasa yang real gitu. Makanya memang kita juga bicara di sini mengenai bagaimana menjaga supaya internal auditor tidak direprimand gitu untuk ini. Tapi itu berat sih Pak. Jadi merekanya memang yang juga harus paham. Mari kita bersama-sama menundukkan kepala dan berdoa semoga mereka mendapat hidayah.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Ijal. Thank you George. Haji Mesan, you want to add something?
Okay. I think Anja did a good answer, but I don't know what she talked about.
Dia nggak ngerti padahal saya ngomong apa.
But independence, very good question and also very difficult question to answer. And for me, number one, everybody in the organization should deeply understand internal auditor should be independent to provide an objective result. So these kind of deep learning, understanding through the organization, then that helps internal auditor to be independent. So build up this kind of culture is very important. And also, second, think based on the culture, maybe we need an infrastructure of internal auditing. Number one is, as Joyce said, reporting line. That is important to the CEO or board of directors, or as an outside person or outside external board members, like that. Number two is coordination with, CEOs, or sometimes CEO does something wrong. So maybe coordination with external board members or certified accountant. This kind of coordination is important. Strategy is needed. If you just simply fight with these kind of things, maybe they will kill you. So strategy is important. That's what I can say.
Saya tambahin
Thank
dikit
you.
lagi ya,
Okay.
Brimade ya. Ini sekalian nih mumpung di ruangan ini ada para regulator kita gitu. Dan pemeriksa kita. Kalau kita mau bikin governance-nya bagus gitu kan ya, kita juga butuh dukungan dari regulator loh. Itu sangat penting gitu. Dari pemeriksa kita. Mengerti bahwa governance itu bukan checklist. Governance itu adalah benar-benar sesuatu mekanisme yang dijalankan. Kalau kita masih melihatnya sebagai checklist, kasihan organisasi-organisasi di sini, baik kementerian maupun perusahaan-perusahaan, itu berat karena kalau manajemennya tidak support, ya hanya sekedar tampilan luarnya. Jadi ini sedikit curcol kepada para pemeriksa dan regulator kita gitu ya, bahwa kalau cek governance beneran cek gitu ya, it's very important. It's not a checklist, it's not something that ada dokumen, it's nothing. It's nothing. When you see inside, If it's only a checklist, it really means nothing. So you really need to understand that governance is more than just that. And if you want to build up a good governance ecosystem, it is something that need to be emphasized by the regulators and the government inspectors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we all know that it's difficult. But this is the small step that we should all take, yeah, to educate our board member, our leaders, something like that. And we have one more question about every news currently right now are spreading the fear for any one of us, saying that 2023 will gonna be a big recession all over the world, something like that. How internal audit will gonna contribute to prevent that event, and how the standard will play its role? Is it the question answerable? I think it's
So when we look at the economic situations in general or changes to the environment, the standards are how do I say it? They're geared in a way, or at least the new ones are, where you need to scan the environment. You need to update, understand where things are, and focus on your key risks. It's simply redirecting your audit plan to the risks that matter the most. So the risks that matter the most in a changing environment, in a depression, or where we perceive a recession or depression happening, are going to be different from when there's a boom. So you're going to be focusing on cost reduction, you'll be focusing on maybe fraud a bit, things of that sort. So you have to change your focus based on that change in the risk, and the standards are geared for that. So it's not, it's sort of environment neutral, because you can't customize standards for specific economic times.
anyone want it? Okay,
Yes.
Ms. Haji Mesan.
Yes. In the past, once I read the one report, says in the depression season, internal audit department decreased the staff because of the cost reduction. But since internal audit provider good job and adding value to the organizations, it be ridiculous for the management to reduce the internal audit staff. So not only achieve the contribution, but also what I say, CAE's explanation is important. Sometimes accountability is important. How much we are contributing to the organization. This is one thing. But even so, sometimes because of the cost reduction, they may reduce the internal audit department. In that case, you should think of something else. Usage of IT. That one we talk about standard. Standard is universal. Whatever, good time, bad time, standard is a standard. That we must keep it. But we use to achieve the standard requirement. Maybe we should think of the usage of ITs and also cooperation with second line, first line, this kind of things. Please think of that in your situation. But that's the things I can say.
Bu Angela want to add something on this?
Mungkin saya tambahin sedikit aja bahwa standar yang lagi digodok ya, itu kan membudidayakan supaya internal auditor itu lebih gesit. Melakukan risk assessment-nya itu beneran bukan hanya engagement risk gitu kan ya, tetapi setiap ada perubahan yang seperti apa kita melihat. Kita sekarang misalnya melihat ada sekarang naikin suku bunga. Kalau kata orang-orang, kalau suku bunga dinaikin kurang lebih 12 bulan lagi inflasi. Apa yang akan kita udah pikirin? Kita udah nyampein belum kepada komite audit kita, kepada direktur kita, kepada komisaris kita. Ini seperti ini loh, risikonya begini. Maka kita harus ada kuda-kuda seperti ini. Krisis energi misalnya. Itu di Eropa gara-gara Rusia, Ukraina. Tunggu aja, dia akan beli bahan baku energi dari Asia, harga naik. Akhirnya di sini naik semua, akhirnya apa? Krisis energinya dunia, ya kan? Jadi hal seperti itu perlu dipikirin oleh kita semua gitu loh. Dan bagaimana kita contribute itu kalau kita bisa antisipasi, kita bisa identifikasi. Jadi kita perlu kuatkan memang kita punya pemahaman dan kalau kita grab itu standar itu meminta kita untuk melakukan pemikiran tadi scanning the environment gitu kan ya. Seperti apa perubahan-perubahan yang ada dan how it will impact us and our organization. Dan bagaimana kita bukan hanya bisa survive tapi kita bisa mungkin gain something malahan dari situ gitu ya. Opportunity. Jadi mungkin gitu kali Bri.
Okay, thank you. So before we conclude, I'm just gonna ask when will this standard will be implemented?
This standard will be put for public exposure the first quarter next year. Yeah, or quarter 1, quarter 2. There will be a 90 days period for public comments for each the general standard and the application standard. So please give your thoughts, your input and feedback. So that it will work for you.
Okay, thank you. So for the closing statement, maybe one sentence for any of you. Start from Haji Misan, one sentence about the standards. What do we expect in the upcoming standards?
Standard gives you opportunity to, what should I say, opportunity for internal auditors to more work effectively and efficiently and contribute to the organization's growth. So this is opportunity, good opportunity. Think positively, that's all.
Thank you, Haji. George?
So I think when you have standards or a set of rules, you need to think about the spirit of those rules when you apply them and try to achieve the desired outcomes from it. So if you approach the standards or any set of rules like a tick-the-box exercise, you're not going to add value. So to Hajime's point earlier on the downturn, are you contributing well? Are you adding value to an organization? I think that's a question you need to ask when you're building those standards. As a result of applying them, are you adding value? Or should the business do something else with that money?
Okay, Bu Angela?
I would say that embrace the standard because then you will be valuable. So do not separate yourself from the standard. Try to embrace it, implement it, and own it so that you add value.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our finalists here. Please give applause to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. So before we end the session, I think we have, please stay here. We have from the IAA of Indonesia giving you a token of appreciation. Mr. Joni Patibang, could you please go to the stage?
Baik, kami persilakan kepada Bapak Joni untuk dapat naik ke atas panggung. Bapak Joni Patibang karena selanjutnya akan memberikan token of appreciation untuk seluruh narasumber dan juga moderator. Kami persilakan. Baik, dan selanjutnya kami persilakan untuk memberikan kepada moderator Bapak Joni, kami mohon berkenan. Dan disilakan untuk dapat melakukan foto bersama. Baik, terima kasih. Hadirin sekalian, sekali lagi boleh minta tepuk tangan yang paling meriah untuk sesi pertama ini. Panel diskusi sesi pertama dengan tema International Professional Practice Framework Evolution.